He thought it was just another quiet morning in the Silverpine Range. Cold air, gray light, nothing moved, then something did, a flicker beneath a pine root, a breath that didn't belong. Caleb Reed lifted his binoculars and froze. In a hollow beneath the roots, a mother bobcat Myra had just given birth. 3 tiny lives, 2 brown-spotted, already crawling toward her warmth, and one white, not pale, not gray. White like fresh snow before any footprints, so bright it almost glowed against the dark. Caleb blinked, thinking maybe the light had fooled him, but no, it was there, small, weak, breathing. He'd seen births before in these mountains, moose, fox, even a black bear once, but never this. Myra hesitated. Instinct told her to protect the strong ones, to forget the frail, but something inside her refused. Slowly, she began to lick the tiny white body clean. A mother's decision made without words. Caleb whispered, "Hang in there, little one." And in that frozen silence, he felt something stir, the start of a story he wasn't supposed to be part of, but already was. The days that followed tested everything. The storm season had come early. Wind howled through the ridges, snow thick as ash. Caleb kept his distance, a ranger's duty, but his eyes returned to that den every dawn. He watched the white cubs Saul struggle, smaller than his siblings, always fighting for a place that wasn't already taken. He'd crawl, fall, try again, each movement fragile, each breath stubborn. Nature doesn't wait for miracles, Caleb once wrote. Still, he couldn't look away. One afternoon, a shadow crossed the snow. Broad wings, golden, slow, silent, an eagle circled above the hollow. Myra rose, muscles coiled. Her breath came fast, a hiss breaking from her throat. The eagle dipped lower. Predator met mother, 2 wild hearts, one hunger, one love. She struck at the sky, claws slicing air. The eagle banked away, defeated. Caleb exhaled. "Good girl," he whispered, "hold your ground." Then came the storm, the kind that erases sound. Snow piled like dust on the pines. Wind howled through the hollows. Inside the den, Myra pressed her body over her cubs. The 2 brown ones nestled close. Saul, the white one, was shoved aside, lost in the dark. Caleb could barely see through the blur, but he could feel the tension, the thin line between warmth and silence. He wrote in his notebook. "White cub struggling, cold, severe risk." Then he stopped. He couldn't finish the sentence. By dawn, the world had gone still again. Myra stirred, weary, 2 cubs' breath strong. The third barely moved. She nudged him. Once, twice, nothing. Then a flicker, one breath, then another. Alive, barely. Caleb let out the breath he'd been holding. The mountains stayed silent, as if waiting to see what would happen next. But the wild never stays gentle for long. That evening, a new sound crept through the timber, low, deliberate, heavy. Flint, the dominant tom of this territory, emerged from the brush. Myra stepped out of the den, body low, eyes locked on his. A mother standing between death and what she loved. Flint growled, deep and steady, taking slow steps forward. Inside the den, the cubs whimpered. Then came it, that faint cry, high and thin. Saul's cry. Flint froze, his ears twitched. Something about that sound unsettled him, too fragile, too bright. He scraped his claws against a stump, marked his claim, and turned back into the trees. Caleb whispered, "Good girl, you did it." But he knew predators like Flint don't disappear. They wait, days blurred, the snow-hardened prey vanished. Myra grew leaner. She had to hunt, had to teach. He watched from the ridge as she crouched low, tail twitching. A rabbit froze ahead. Her cubs copied her stance, clumsy but eager. Then a flash of white. Saul's coat caught the light. The rabbit bolted. Hunt lost. Myra hissed, snapped her jaws. Saul flattened against the snow, trembling. Caleb wrote, "Mother agitated." Possible rejection. The words felt heavier than the notebook in his hands. That night, the wind screamed through the cabin. He stared at the fire, then at his glove. A single white hair clung to it. He couldn't say why, but it felt like a sign. He whispered, "Observation only, nature knows best." But the words didn't sound true anymore. The next morning, the den was almost empty. Myra had left 2 strong cubs trailing behind her. At the mouth of the hollow, half buried in frost, Saul lay still, alive, but barely. Caleb's hands trembled as he raised the binoculars. He already knew what he was going to do. "Maybe the rules don't fit this one," he muttered. And for the first time in 20 years of service, he broke protocol. The climb down the ridge was brutal, snow to his knees, breath tearing his lungs. He reached the hollow, crouched low. There, curled in the frozen dirt, was Saul. Caleb whispered, "Hey, little one." The cub stirred, lifted its head, blue eyes dull but alive. He reached forward, gloveless. Cold bit through his skin as he scooped the trembling body into his palms. It weighed nothing, just skin, bone, and a heartbeat that refused to quit. He tucked Saul inside his jacket, close to his chest. Each step uphill felt heavier than the mountain itself. "Stay with me," he whispered. "I've got you." Inside the ranger cabin, firelight flickered gold on the walls. He set the cub by the stove, rubbed tiny circles along its back. Steam rose off his coat, off his tears. He filled a dropper with milk, held it near Saul's mouth. Nothing, then a swallow, another, another. Caleb smiled through the ache in his throat. That's it, good boy. He didn't sleep that night. Just listened to the small, uneven breaths beside the fire. When dawn came, Saul was still breathing, stronger, a little louder. Caleb laughed, tired, cracked, but real. Days passed. The storm cleared. Every morning he mixed milk. Every night he whispered encouragement. Each line in his notebook grew more human, less clinical. Feb 6, Saul recovering, feeding regularly. Survived the impossible. He paused, then added, today I chose. Spring came slow that year. The snow retreated inch by inch, creeks thawed, the forest woke, Saul grew stronger. His fur brightened again, white as winter sun. He started to climb everything, boots, chair legs, the window frame. He'd fall, shake it off, try again. Caleb couldn't help but laugh, not loud, just the kind that sneaks out when your heart remembers it still works. One evening he carried Saul outside. The air smelled of pine and thawing earth. He set the cub down. Saul blinked at the light, lifted his head, sniffed. This is your world, Caleb whispered. Yours, not mine. Saul took a few steps. Then turned back, looked up, and let out a rough sound, half growl, half purr. Caleb smiled. Yeah, I hear you. A few weeks later, Saul climbed the fence. He sat at the edge of the clearing, staring into the trees. Caleb knelt beside him. You going? He asked softly. Saul turned toward the forest, then looked back once. Caleb lifted a hand but didn't move closer. Go live your life, little one. The bobcat disappeared into the pines. The forest swallowed the sound. That night the cabin felt impossibly quiet. Caleb opened his notebook and wrote one line. The wild didn't lose him, it just gave him back. Years passed. Winters came and went. The mountains stayed. Caleb aged, hair grayer, hands slower. Yet every morning he walked that same ridge above the Silverpine woods. Some habits don't die, they just soften into ritual. He never forgot the white cub. Every flash of pale fur in the brush made his heart hitch. Every paw print in the snow made him wonder. But seasons turned and nothing came. He told himself it was better that way. He'd done his part. Still, some nights he swore he heard soft steps beyond the tree line, the kind that remember. Then one winter morning he woke before dawn. The sky cold as steel, frost on the windows, the forest holding its breath. Something pulled him toward that old ridge again, old instinct, old ghosts. He hiked slow through the new snow. When he reached the overlook, the sun was just climbing, turning the trees gold. He brushed frost from the bark of an ancient pine. Good work, old girl, he whispered, and then he froze. At the edge of the clearing, a shape, graceful, silent, a bobcat, white, perfect, alive. Caleb's breath caught, he didn't move. The bobcat stepped forward, eyes blue, calm. It looked straight at him. Saul, it had to be. For a long moment, neither moved, just man and wild, standing in the space between memory and miracle. Then movement, two smaller shapes behind the white cat, kittens, gray with faint streaks of white in their fur. Caleb whispered, "Oh my God, a father." The cubs nudged Saul's leg. He brushed his nose against them gently, guiding them toward cover. Caleb laughed, low and shaky. Guess you found your way after all. Saul looked back one last time. Their eyes met, recognition without words. Then the bobcat bowed his head and vanished into the trees. Caleb stood there long after they were gone. The clearing glowed under the rising sun. Snow sparkled like it remembered. He opened his old notebook, flipped to the page. Feb 6 survived the impossible. Below it he wrote, years later returned, not alone. He smiled, closed the book, and whispered, good job, kid. As he turned to leave, the wind moved through the pines, soft, warm, almost like a purr. Back at the cabin, he placed the notebook on the table and brewed his coffee. Outside, snow drifted slow and steady, each flake catching the light before it disappeared. He looked out the window and smiled. You're part of the mountains now. Later that morning, he stepped onto the porch. A single white feather lay on the railing, not from any bird he knew. He picked it up, turned it in his hand, and laughed quietly. All right, I see you. He tucked it into the notebook, closed it for the last time. He never told anyone what he'd seen, not his colleagues, not his friends in town. Some stories belong to the heart, not the record. When people asked about the white cub, he just said, he made it, he's where he's supposed to be. Because deep down, Caleb knew the truth, kindness, when given to something wild, never disappears. It circles back in its own way, in its own time. One life saved, one man changed, and a promise kept by the mountains themselves. You can call it coincidence, you can call it nature, but Caleb Reed, he just called it grace. Because out here, kindness isn't soft, it isn't easy. It's holding a fragile heartbeat in your hands and refusing to let go. Balance isn't about rules, it's about respect. You help when you can, you step back when you must. And sometimes both can be true. Years later, when Caleb thought of Saul, he didn't see the rescue, he saw the return. That quiet look that said, I remember. No words, no reward, just understanding. And maybe that's the proof we spend our lives looking for, not applause, not glory, just the knowledge that what you did once mattered. Somewhere out there, a white bobcat still walks these woods, maybe with his own family, maybe alone. Doesn't matter, what matters is that he got his chance. And in giving it, Caleb found his own, because sometimes the wildest hearts don't vanish. They find their way back, and when they do, they remind us that love, even the quiet kind, always leaves tracks.